You think high heat seals the juice? That's the lie. This is the truth. The smell hits you before you even see the plate. That thin, gray, acrid smoke of rendered fat hitting charcoal, followed by that other smell, the one you pretend not to notice. Burnt protein. Dry muscle fiber, that faint, bitter tang of a steak that went from raw to ruined in 30 seconds flat and cost you $47 at the butcher counter. I've watched it happen 1,000 times. Man stands over glowing coals, tongs in hand, sweat on his brow, flipping that beautiful cut of beef like he's trying to win a carnival prize. And every single time, the English think they're doing it right. Every single time they walk away chewing on leather, wondering why the steakhouse gets it so much better. Here's the part that should make you uneasy. My name is Jeremiah Byler. I've been an Amish homesteader and craftsman for 43 years. I've raised Angus cross steers on grass and hay. I've broken down more sides of beef than I can count. And I've taught 3 generations of young men how to take a knife to a primal cut without flinching. I've also cooked more steaks than any restaurant chef you've ever seen, only I do it without gas lines, without infrared burners, and without any of those high-tech gadgets the English spend their paychecks on. In our community, we don't have grills. Not the kind you're thinking of. No propane tanks. No chimney starters. No stainless steel grates polished to a mirror shine. What we have is a cast iron skillet that's been in my family for 112 years, a block of wood, and a secret that the commercial meat industry has been burying since they figured out they could sell you the idea of grilling instead of the reality of flavor. And I'm going to give it to you right now. Every step, every temperature, every penny. Here's the part that should make you uneasy. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the big box grocery chains, and every grilling magazine on that rack at the checkout. They all push the same lie. They tell you that a great steak comes from high heat. They sell you $500 pellet grills. They sell you lumped charcoal with fancy names. They sell you rubs that cost $18 for 4 ounces. And they absolutely know that 90% of home cooks are going to ruin that prime cut within the first 3 minutes because high heat is the enemy. High heat is the tool of the commercial kitchen where they can burn through 100 steaks an hour and throw out the bad ones. But you buy one, maybe two if it's a special occasion. You can't afford to learn by trial and error. So you keep failing, keep chewing on dry meat, keep telling yourself it's the cut, not the technique. And then you go back and spend another 40, 50, $60 on another piece of beef, hoping this time will be different. The industry knows that if you knew the old world butcher's method, the method we've used in Lancaster County since before electricity reached the barn, you'd never buy another grill accessory again. You'd never buy another rub. You'd never feel the need to spend $300 on a backyard appliance that you use 8 times a year. They don't want you to know that the best steak you've ever eaten can be cooked on a flat piece of iron with salt, with patience, and with a clock. So let's get plain about the science. Because trust me on this, once you understand the mechanism, you'll never unsee it. When you throw a steak onto a hot grill grate, the surface temperature hits 400, 500 degrees in seconds. The muscle fibers on the outside contract violently. They squeeze. And what do they squeeze out? Moisture, fat, all that beautiful intramuscular marbling you paid extra for. It drips down onto the coals, flares up into those pretty orange flames you think are adding char flavor, and what you're actually tasting is burned rendered fat, smoke that contains acrolein, which is a chemical irritant, and it's drying out your steak from the outside in. Meanwhile, the inside is still cold, so you leave it there. 2 minutes, flip. 2 minutes, flip again. By the time the center hits medium rare, The outer half inch is already overcooked, gray, tough. That's not a steak. That's a gradient of disappointment. The old world butcher's secret is about temperature control, not temperature intensity. You don't want to blast the outside and chase the middle. You want to gently, patiently coax the heat all the way through the muscle so that the fibers relax rather than seize. When muscle proteins denature slowly at around 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, they hold on to the water. They release that water only at the very end, when you're ready to serve it. That's the difference between a steak that makes you close your eyes and a steak that makes you reach for the steak sauce. And steak sauce. Let's just say the English invented that to cover up bad cooking. We don't use steak sauce in our house. Never have. All right, here's what you need. Write this down if you have to, because I'm going to give you the exact method we use in our butcher shop on Saturday nights when the young men come over for supper. 1 cast iron skillet. 10 inches, 12 inches, doesn't matter. You can find one at a yard sale for $8 or at the hardware store for $25. I'm using a smooth-bottomed vintage Wagner that cost me $3 at an estate auction. Do not use non-stick. Do not use enameled. Bare cast iron only. 1 steak. Choose a ribeye. That's my preference because the fat content is generous. New York strip works too. 1.5 inches thick minimum. Don't go thinner than that, or the method won't work right. That steak should cost you around $18 to $22 for a good one, depending on where you are. If you go to a local butcher rather than the big chain, you'll pay maybe $2 more per pound, but you'll get a cut that hasn't been mechanically tenderized or pumped full of solution. 1 tablespoon of coarse kosher salt, not table salt, the coarse stuff. That's about 2 cents worth. 1/4 teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper, another penny. 2 tablespoons of clarified butter or lard if you have it. We render our own lard from the pigs we raise, but you can buy a jar of clarified butter at the store for about $6, and it'll last you for 6 steaks. So call it $1 per steak for the fat. A kitchen thermometer. Instant read. You can get a decent one for $12. If you don't have one, borrow one, because guessing isn't allowed here. Total cost to cook that steak the right way: salt, pepper, fat, and a few minutes. Less than $2 worth of ingredients. The skillet is a one-time investment. The thermometer is a one-time investment. After that, every steak you cook costs you about the same as a cup of coffee at that drive-through window. Now, here's the step-by-step. The way I'd explain it to my own son if he was standing at the counter with a knife in his hand. Take your steak out of the cold box 2 hours before you plan to cook it. That's right, 2 hours. Not 30 minutes, not an hour. 2 full hours. Set it on a clean plate. Pat it dry with a paper towel. Get every bit of surface moisture off and salt it on both sides with that coarse kosher salt. Don't be shy. You're not making soup, but you're not building a salt crust either. Just an even, light coating that looks like a light frost. That salt will start to draw moisture out, then the moisture will reabsorb, pulling the salt deep into the muscle. That's called dry brining. The English spend $12 on marinades that do the opposite. They add water and dilute the beef flavor. We don't do that. Place your cast iron skillet on your stovetop, or if you're cooking over an open fire, set it on a grate over low coals, not high flames. Low, gentle heat. Turn your burner to medium-low, not medium-high. We're aiming for a surface temperature of 325 degrees Fahrenheit. How do you know when you're there? Flick a drop of water onto the pan. It should sizzle gently and evaporate in about 2 seconds. If it dances and disappears instantly, your pan is too hot. Back it off. Add your clarified butter or lard. Let it melt and shimmer, but don't let it brown. We're not sautéing vegetables. We're creating a heat transfer medium. Lay your steak into the pan. And this is where the English lose their minds. You do not touch it. Don't press it with a spatula. Don't move it around. Don't flip it. You let it sit there undisturbed for 4 full minutes on that first side. I mean it. Set a timer. 4 minutes. The heat is so low that the steak isn't going to burn. It's going to gently brown, developing that crust you want, but slowly enough that the heat has time to travel inward. Flip it just once, and now you let that second side cook for 3 minutes. Why three instead of four? Because the steak has already started to warm through from the first side, and you don't want to overshoot. Now, this is the secret that changed everything for my family. After those 3 minutes, you take that skillet, handle wrapped in a dish towel, mind the burn, and you place it into a preheated oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, the oven. You leave it in there for 6 to 10 minutes, depending on the thickness of your steak. For a 1.5 inch cut, 7 minutes gets you a perfect medium rare. For 2 inches, 9 minutes. Every minute after that pushes you toward medium and beyond, which I don't recommend, but that's your business. The thermometer. After that oven time, pull the skillet, stick that thermometer into the center of the steak, horizontally right through the side. You're looking for 130 degrees Fahrenheit, not 120, not 120, not 140, 130. That temperature, when the steak rests, will carry over to 135, which is the golden number for medium rare. If you hit 130, you're done. And here's the most important step of all, the one they never tell you in those glossy magazines. You must rest that steak on a warm plate under a loose tent of foil for a full 10 minutes. I said 10, not 5, not as long as you can stand it. 10 minutes on the clock. That resting period allows the muscle fibers to relax, to reabsorb all the juice that tried to escape. If you cut it at the 5 minute mark, that beautiful juice runs right onto your cutting board and you've lost the flavor. 10 minutes is patience, and patience is free. Now here's a bonus trick we use at the butcher block that I've never seen written down anywhere. Before you cook that steak, after you've dry brined it, but before it hits the pan, take the heel of your hand and give it a firm but not aggressive pressing. Just once. Press the meat flat against the cutting board. What you're doing is breaking the surface tension of those outer muscle fibers, opening up the grain just enough that the heat penetrates even more evenly. It sounds like nothing. Try it. You'll feel the difference in the bite. The other trick, and this one I learned from my grandfather, who was a butcher in Holmes County before I was born, is to rub the cut edge of a clove of garlic across the surface of the finished steak right after it comes out of the oven and before it rests. Not minced, not sauteed, just a clean cut half clove rubbed directly on the hot crust. That raw garlic oil blossoms into the meat, and you get a perfume that no powder or granulated garlic can match. Cost? About 6 cents worth of a head of garlic. So let's do the math, because I know you're paying attention to numbers. That one ribeye at the grocery store, $22. Your time may be 20 minutes of active work. Cost of the dry brine salt, 2 cents. Butter, $1. Garlic, a nickel. Total active ingredient cost, $1 and change. Now compare that to the alternative. You go to that popular steakhouse chain. You order the same cut. You pay $59 plus tax and tip, so call it $75. And what did they do? They cooked it on an infrared grill at 800 degrees. They probably oversalted it to cover the lack of beef flavor. They served it with a stick of compound butter that tasted more like herbs than cow. And you walked out paying 3 times what the raw meat cost for a result you could have beaten at home with a cast iron skillet and a 20-minute tutorial from an old Amish butcher who's too stubborn to fail. That's the part that should make you uneasy. The restaurant industry, the grill manufacturers, the spice companies, they have built a multi-billion-dollar edifice on the idea that cooking a steak is hard, that you need special equipment, that you need exotic rubs, that you need to seal in the juices with a blast of heat that, as we've already established, doesn't seal anything, it just squeezes them out. They profit from your failure. Every dry steak you eat at home sends you back to their door, and they know it. So here's your call to action for this weekend. I want you to do this. I want you to test me. This Saturday morning, go to a local butcher, not the big box meat counter, and buy a 1.5-inch ribeye. Tell them you want it cut fresh. Spend the $22. Bring it home. At noon, 2 hours before supper, set it on the counter. Pat it dry, salt it. Leave it alone until the clock says 4 in the afternoon. Get your cast iron skillet out. If you don't have one, drive over to that antique mall or the hardware store and pick one up. You can do that in an hour. Spend no more than $25. That's your birthday present to yourself. Heat that pan to 325, add your clarified butter or lard, and follow those steps exactly 4 minutes first side, 3 minutes second side, 7 minutes in the 275 oven, 130 on the thermometer, and 10 minutes rest. Carve against the grain. That's important. Slice perpendicular to the muscle lines, not parallel. That shortens the fibers, making each bite more tender. Take a photograph of that steak. Cut open, pink from edge to edge with no gray band, and send it to a friend who still grills over propane, just to make them ask questions. Now, I've been cooking this way my whole life, and it never fails. But there's another butcher's secret that I've held back. A technique for dry aging your own beef in a simple wooden box, no special bags, no temperature controlled fridges, that will give you steakhouse flavor for a quarter of the cost. That's for another time, Lord willing. For now, I want to hear from you. You ever cooked a steak that turned out chewy, tough, gray, the kind that made you wish you just had soup? Tell me about it down in the comments. I read every one, and I might pick a few to answer in my next talk. My name is Jeremiah Byler. This is the old way. It's slower, it's cheaper, and it's the only way that doesn't lie to you.